In the vast expanse of the Galactic Council's most prestigious military academy, where beings from 1,000 worlds gather to learn the art of war and survival, one question echoes through the crystalline corridors. Why do humans, despite being one of the youngest species to achieve spaceflight, consistently outperform civilizations that have mastered the stars for millennia? The answer lies not in superior technology, overwhelming firepower, or ancient wisdom passed down through generations. It lies in something far more terrifying to their alien classmates: humanity's uncanny ability to adapt, survive, and thrive in situations that would break the spirit of even the most hardened galactic veterans. When Instructor Vexthal, a battle-scarred Zephyrian War veteran with over 2 centuries of combat experience, decided to conduct an experiment using human cadets as subjects, neither he nor his students could have predicted that the results would fundamentally challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare, survival, and the true meaning of strength. This is the story of that experiment, and the revelation that would send shockwaves through every military institution across the known universe. The morning sun of Kepler 442b cast long shadows across the parade grounds of the Galactic Military Academy, its amber light filtering through the atmospheric processors that made this world habitable for the diverse array of species that called it home. Instructor Vexthal stood at the edge of the training facility, his 6 arms crossed behind his back as he watched the latest batch of cadets file into Formation Hall Alpha. The Zephyrian had seen thousands of recruits pass through these halls over his 2-century tenure, but today's group held particular interest. Among the usual mix of Corvan heavy-worlders, ethereal axiom telepaths, and silicon-based Christek warriors stood a small contingent that had been causing quite a stir among the faculty, humans. Terra had joined the Galactic Council only 47 standard years ago, making them one of the newest members by several millennia. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards, their physical capabilities unremarkable, and their lifespan laughably short. Yet somehow, in every conflict simulation, every survival exercise, and every tactical examination, the human cadets consistently achieved results that defied logical explanation. Cadet Sarah Chen stepped into the hall alongside her classmates, her regulation combat suit fitting snugly over her compact frame. At barely 1.7 meters tall and weighing only 65 kilograms, she appeared almost fragile next to the towering Corvan beside her, whose homeworld's gravity was 3 times that of Earth. Behind her, Marcus Rodriguez and Elena Volkov chatted quietly in their native language, seemingly unconcerned by the intimidating presence of their alien classmates. The 4th human in their squad, David Kim, maintained the stoic silence that had earned him both respect and wariness from the other species. His dark eyes swept the room with an analytical precision that reminded Vexthal of the tactical computers used in fleet command centers. "Attention, cadets!" Vexthal's voice resonated through the hall, translated instantly by the universal communication implants each student carried. "Today marks the beginning of your advanced survival and adaptation protocol examination." A ripple of nervous energy passed through the assembled students. The ASAP exam was legendary throughout the academy, a month-long ordeal that tested every aspect of a cadet's training under conditions designed to break even the strongest spirits. Historical data showed that approximately 30% of cadets failed to complete the program, with many requiring psychological rehabilitation afterward. The instructor's 4 eyes scanned the crowd, lingering on the human contingent. "You will be divided into mixed species squads and deployed to various hostile environments across this system. Your objective is simple: survive, adapt, and complete a series of missions that will test your limits." Zektar, a Corvan whose massive frame spoke to generations of heavy world evolution, raised one of his boulder-like fists. "Instructor, will we be provided with standard survival equipment?" "Negative," Vexthal replied, a hint of what humans might interpret as a smile crossing his features. "You will begin with nothing but your training uniforms and basic water rations for the first day. Everything else you must acquire, build, or improvise." The silence that followed was heavy with apprehension. Several of the more delicate species began to show signs of distress, their bioluminescent skin patterns shifting to colors that indicated fear among their kind. It was David Kim who broke the silence. Instructor, are there any restrictions on how we acquire additional resources? An excellent question, Cadet Kim. You are prohibited from harming sentient beings or causing permanent damage to the test environments. Beyond that, improvisation and resourcefulness are not only permitted but encouraged. Vexthal gestured toward a series of transport pods that had appeared at the hall's far end. Squad assignments are already loaded into your personal data units. You have 1 hour to familiarize yourselves with your teammates before deployment. I suggest you use that time wisely. As the cadets dispersed to find their assigned groups, Vexthal noticed something that would become significant in the days to come. While most species immediately began forming hierarchical structures based on physical strength, technological knowledge, or social standing, the humans simply began asking questions. Sarah Chun found herself assigned to Squad 7 alongside Tina Sarah, an axiom whose crystalline body structure could interface directly with most electronic systems. Grok, a Corvin engineer whose specialty lay in heavy construction and demolition, and Veltar, a Zephyrian like their instructor, though much younger and less experienced in combat situations. So, Sarah began, settling cross-legged on the floor in a manner that seemed to fascinate her alien squad mates. What can everyone do that might not be obvious from looking at you? The question caught the others off guard. Most species began such interactions by establishing dominance hierarchies or comparing technological capabilities. This direct, practical approach was refreshingly efficient. Sarah's crystalline form shimmered as she processed the query. My people can interface with most standard galactic technologies without external tools. However, I have also studied biochemistry extensively. I can identify most toxins and many useful compounds found in natural environments. Grok's rumbling bass voice filled the space around them. Heavy lifting, obviously, but I also have enhanced geological knowledge. I can identify mineral deposits, assess structural stability, and predict seismic activity with reasonable accuracy. Veltar's response came more hesitantly. I have standard Zephyrian multispectral vision and can see across 17 different electromagnetic frequencies. My flight capabilities are limited in most atmospheric conditions, but I can scout from elevated positions. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. I'm probably the weakest physically here, but humans have a few advantages that might not be apparent. We're persistence hunters by evolution. We can maintain steady activity for extended periods without rest. We also have very good pattern recognition and can adapt to new situations quickly. Plus, we're really good at making tools from available materials. Making tools. Grok leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the group. Do you mean crafting weapons? Weapons, tools, shelter, whatever we need, Sarah replied. Give us some rocks, plants, and metal scraps, and we'll build you a functioning civilization. It's just how we think. Meanwhile, across the hall, Marcus Rodriguez was having a similar conversation with his assigned squad. His teammates included Nexus, a hive-minded collective of insectoid beings that operated as a single consciousness, Lumina, an energy-based life form from the galactic core, and Basalt, a silicon-based crystech whose body could withstand temperatures that would vaporize most organic matter. The key thing about humans, Marcus was explaining, is that we're basically the galactic equivalent of that friend who shows up to a formal dinner party in jeans and somehow makes it work. We don't have the best equipment, the strongest bodies, or the longest lives. But we'll figure out a way to make it work with whatever we've got. Nexus buzzed with collective curiosity. Elaborate on this adaptation process. Our database indicates humans originate from a relatively stable, moderate environment. How does this translate to survival capabilities in extreme conditions? Marcus grinned, an expression that seemed to unsettle several nearby cadets. That's the thing. Earth isn't actually that stable. We've got ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, plague outbreaks, and continental drift constantly changing things up. Our entire evolutionary history is basically, oh, the environment changed completely? Cool, we'll figure it out. Lumina's photonic form flickered with interest. This suggests psychological adaptability rather than physical specialization. Exactly. Most species seem to evolve toward perfection in their specific environment. Humans evolved to be okay at everything and really good at figuring out new stuff on the fly. As the hour progressed, similar conversations were taking place throughout the hall. Elena Volkov found herself explaining human endurance capabilities to a group that included a methane-breathing titan and a crystalline entity that had never encountered biological life before joining the academy. Humans can run for days without stopping, she was saying, demonstrating some basic stretching techniques. Not fast, but consistently. We also don't shut down like most species do when we're stressed. Instead, we tend to become more creative and resourceful. David Kim's group had taken a different approach entirely. Rather than explaining human capabilities, he was systematically cataloging what each team member could contribute and identifying potential synergies. Felnox, your natural camouflage abilities combined with infrared sensing could provide excellent reconnaissance. Quartz, your ability to analyze material composition at the molecular level would be invaluable for resource identification. And Whisper, your sonic manipulation capabilities could serve both communication and construction purposes. Felnox, a shape-shifting species from the Outer Rim, seemed impressed by the systematic approach. You organize information efficiently, human David. Most species focus on individual capabilities rather than group potential. Humans are pack hunters, David replied simply. We think in terms of how the group can succeed, not just how we can personally survive. As the preparation hour drew to a close, Vexthal observed something that would become crucial to his understanding of human nature. While other species spent time establishing leadership hierarchies, debating strategies, or sharing technological knowledge, the humans had instinctively begun building trust and understanding with their alien teammates. They asked questions not to establish superiority, but to understand capabilities. They shared information not to impress, but to increase group survival chances. And, most importantly, they seemed genuinely excited about the challenge ahead rather than apprehensive. Final boarding call for all squads, Vexthal announced. Transport to your designated test environments begins now. As the cadets filed toward their assigned pods, the instructor noticed something else that would prove significant. The humans were the only species actively helping their teammates with equipment checks, sharing their limited water rations despite having no more than anyone else, and offering encouragement to visibly nervous alien classmates. Squad 7's transport pod was sleek, but cramped, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. As they secured themselves for departure, Sarah-chan noticed Sarah's crystalline structure was flickering with stress patterns. First time on survival training? Sarah asked gently. Yes, HFY admitted. My people rarely face situations where our technology cannot provide solutions. The concept of making do with primitive resources is disturbing. Sarah's smile was reassuring rather than condescending. That's actually going to be your advantage. You're going to see solutions the rest of us miss because you think differently. The key is just remembering that there's always a way forward. It might not be the way you expected, but there's always something. As their transport pod engaged its engines and lifted away from the academy, Grok found himself reconsidering his initial assessment of the small human female. Corvin's respected strength above all else, but there was something about Sarah's confidence that spoke to a different kind of strength entirely. The journey to their destination took 6 standard hours, during which the squad members continued to share information and develop strategies. By the time they reached their designated test environment, they had established communication protocols, identified each member's strengths and limitations, and begun developing contingency plans for various scenarios. Their destination was Xeris 7, a desert world with extreme temperature variations, limited water sources, and an atmospheric composition that would challenge most species' respiratory systems. As the pod's doors opened, they were hit by a wall of heat that immediately triggered protective responses in all 4 squad members. The landscape before them was harsh and unforgiving. Endless dunes of crystalline sand under a binary star system that painted the sky in shades of orange and red. In the distance, massive rock formations jutted from the desert floor like the bones of some ancient titan. Environmental analysis complete, HFY reported, her systems automatically interfacing with the pod sensors. Surface temperature, 47 degrees Celsius. Atmospheric pressure, 1.3 standard. Oxygen content, 16%. Humidity, less than 5%. Veltar's wings spread briefly as he tested the air currents. Wind patterns suggest a major storm system approaching from the southwest. Estimated arrival, 18 standard hours. Grok studied the geological formations visible in the distance. Those rock structures show signs of mineral deposits, possibly metallic ores, and the stratification suggests underground water sources. Sarachin stepped onto the burning sand and immediately began scanning the horizon with the methodical precision of a predator. Okay, team, we've got water for one day, extreme heat, low oxygen, and a storm coming, plus whatever mission parameters they're going to throw at us. As if summoned by her words, a holographic message materialized in front of them, transmitted from their pod's communication array. Squad 7. The recording of Instructor Vexthal began. Your mission is to locate and retrieve 3 data caches hidden within a 50-kilometer radius of your current position. The caches contain crucial intelligence that must be recovered before the approaching storm makes the area impassable. You have 72 standard hours to complete this mission. Failure will result in immediate extraction and exam failure for all squad members. The hologram flickered and died, leaving them alone in the desert heat. 3 caches, 50 kilometers, 72 hours. David Kim's voice came through their communication implants from wherever his squad had been deployed. Anyone else think they're not just testing our survival skills? Definitely not, Sarah replied, surprised to realize the communication system was linking all human cadets regardless of squad assignments. This is about something else entirely. As Squad 7 began their trek into the desert, none of them could have predicted that their actions over the next 72 hours would provide Instructor Vexthal with data that would fundamentally change how the galaxy understood human nature. The real test was just beginning. The first 6 hours on Xeris 7 proved to be a revelation for more than just Squad 7. Across the desert planet, 12 squads were beginning their missions, each facing the same brutal conditions and impossible timeline. But as Instructor Vexthal monitored their progress from the orbital command station, patterns began to emerge that challenged every assumption he had made about species adaptation. Sarah Chun led her squad toward the distant rock formations, but her approach defied conventional survival wisdom. While most logical beings would conserve energy and seek shade during the hottest part of the day, Sarah had immediately begun what she called aggressive reconnaissance. We need to map water sources, identify shelter locations, and establish supply caches before the storm hits, she explained as they moved across the burning sand. Waiting for better conditions means we'll be reactive instead of proactive. Sarah's crystalline form was struggling with the heat despite her advanced physiology. Human Sarah, your species' logic appears flawed. Standard survival protocol dictates energy conservation during extreme conditions. Standard protocol assumes you're trying to last until rescue arrives, Sarah replied, never breaking stride. We're not waiting for rescue. We're going to complete the mission, which means we need to work with the environment instead of against it. Grok, whose heavy world physiology was actually well suited to the harsh conditions, found himself impressed despite his initial skepticism. Elaborate on this working with environment concept. Sarah pointed toward a series of thermal updrafts visible in the distance. Those updrafts mean temperature differentials, which usually indicate underground caverns or water sources. The heat that's making us miserable is also giving us navigation data. She gestured toward the binary star system overhead. 2 suns means predictable shadow patterns. We can use those for navigation and timing. And that storm everyone's worried about? It's bringing moisture and potentially forcing animals to move toward shelter, which means we can track them to water sources. 20 kilometers away, Marcus Rodriguez was demonstrating a different aspect of human adaptability. His squad had encountered their first major crisis when Lumina, the energy-based life form, began experiencing power fluctuations due to unexpected interference from the planet's magnetic field. While Nexus was calculating probabilities and Basalt was analyzing the geological factors contributing to the interference, Marcus had already begun implementing a solution that struck his teammates as impossibly primitive yet surprisingly effective. Okay, so your energy matrix is being disrupted by magnetic flux, Marcus said, gathering handfuls of the metallic sand that covered parts of the desert. But that's actually good news. Explain how our teammates' potential dissolution constitutes positive development. Nexus buzzed with collective concern. Marcus grinned as he began arranging the metallic particles in specific patterns around Lumina's fluctuating form. Because humans have been dealing with magnetic interference for centuries, we call it a Faraday cage. Using his combat knife, strips torn from his uniform, and the naturally occurring conductive materials in the desert sand, Marcus constructed a crude but functional electromagnetic shield around Lumina's core essence. This should stabilize your energy matrix long enough for you to adapt to the local conditions, he explained. Humans learned a long time ago that you don't need perfect technology. You just need technology that works well enough to solve the immediate problem. The solution was inelegant by galactic standards, but undeniably effective. Within minutes, Lumina's form had stabilized, and she was able to resume normal function. Human Marcus. Basalt's crystalline voice resonated with curiosity. Your species appears to prioritize functional solutions over optimal ones. Is this a conscious choice or evolutionary limitation? Bit of both, probably, Marcus replied as they resumed their trek. Perfect solutions take time to develop, and time is usually the one thing you don't have in a crisis. Better to have something that works now than something perfect later. Elena Volkov's squad was facing a different challenge entirely. They had located one of the data caches early, but it was positioned at the bottom of a steep ravine that showed signs of recent seismic activity. Her teammates, a methane breather named Fog, a crystalline entity called Prism, and a shapeshifter called Morph, were debating the safest approach to cache retrieval. Structural analysis indicates 73.4% probability of rockfall if we disturb the current equilibrium, Prism calculated. Recommended approach: await better conditions or request mission modification. Elena studied the ravine with the eye of someone who had grown up in the Siberian wilderness. Or we change the equilibrium ourselves. Elaborate, Fog requested, his environmental suit translating the concern in his methane-based communication. Right now, the rocks are held in place by gravity and friction, which makes them unpredictable, Elena explained. But if we deliberately trigger a small collapse in a controlled area, we can create a stable debris slope that will support our weight. She began gathering specific sizes of stones, arranging them with a precision that seemed almost instinctive. Humans have been dealing with unstable terrain for millennia. The trick is making the environment work for you instead of against you. Using carefully placed impacts from selected rocks, Elena triggered a controlled rockfall that cleared a safe path to the cache. The precision of her technique left her teammates awed. She had somehow transformed a deadly trap into a navigable route. But it was David Kim's approach that provided Instructor Vexthal with the most significant data. While other squads were struggling with individual challenges, David had begun implementing something the Instructor had never seen before: adaptive mission architecture. Felnox, what's your maximum range for maintaining camouflage while moving? David asked as his squad approached what appeared to be an impassable canyon system. Approximately 2.3 kilometers in open terrain, less in complex environments, the shapeshifter replied. Quartz, how detailed can you make your molecular analysis without direct contact? I can identify most compounds within a 50-meter radius with 94% accuracy. Whisper, your sonic capabilities. Can you map underground structures? Yes, though the accuracy decreases with depth and complexity. David nodded thoughtfully. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Instead of trying to get to the caches directly, we're going to make the mission come to us. His plan was audacious in its simplicity. Rather than expending energy searching for hidden caches across 50 kilometers of desert, David proposed creating conditions that would force the mission parameters to change in their favor. The caches are designed to test our ability to navigate and survive in extreme conditions, he reasoned. But they're also designed to be findable within the time limit. That means they're positioned based on certain assumptions about cadet capabilities. Using Whisper's sonic mapping abilities, they located underground water sources that connected several areas within their search radius. Felnox's reconnaissance revealed that all 3 cache locations were positioned near these underground water networks. They put the caches near water because they assumed we'd need to follow water sources for survival, David concluded. But what if we don't need to follow the water? What if we bring the water to us? His plan required precise coordination between all squad members, but the concept was brilliant. Instead of searching for caches, they would create a central base camp at the intersection of several underground water networks. Then, using Quartz's molecular analysis and Whisper's sonic capabilities, they would systematically map the entire area and force the mission to resolve around their position. As the first day progressed, Instructor Vexthal began to notice patterns that defied his understanding of species behavior. While other squads were following predictable protocols, conservation of energy, systematic searching, risk avoidance, the human-led squads were implementing strategies that seemed to break fundamental survival rules. They expended energy when logic dictated conservation. They took calculated risks when prudence demanded caution. They modified mission parameters instead of adapting to them. And, most significantly, they consistently achieved results that exceeded projected performance metrics. Computer, analyze current squad performance data and compare to historical norms, Vexthal commanded. The response was immediate and concerning. Human-inclusive squads are achieving mission objectives at 340% of projected rates. Resource efficiency is 280% above average. Team cohesion metrics exceed maximum recorded values. Vexthal's four eyes narrowed as he studied the data streams. These results weren't just unusual. They were impossible according to established military doctrine. Display individual human performance metrics. The data that appeared on his screen challenged everything he thought he knew about adaptation theory. The humans weren't just surviving. They were thriving under conditions that should have broken them within hours. Sarah Chin's squad had not only located their first data cache, but had established a functioning base camp complete with water reclamation systems, shelter, and food storage. Somehow, in the middle of a lifeless desert, they had created a sustainable microecosystem. Marcus Rodriguez had turned his squad's technical crisis into an advantage, using the solutions they developed for Lumina's power issues to enhance their overall operational capabilities. They were now moving across the desert at twice the projected speed, while consuming 40% fewer resources than calculated. Elena Volkov had transformed environmental hazards into navigation aids, turning every obstacle into an opportunity for advancement. Her squad's progress across dangerous terrain was not just efficient, it was elegant. David Kim's squad had achieved something that violated basic mission architecture. They had changed the rules of engagement without violating any protocols. Instead of playing the game they were given, they had created a better game entirely. But the most disturbing data point was something Vexthal almost missed in his analysis. The humans weren't just succeeding individually. They were somehow sharing their success across squad boundaries. Communication logs showed that all 4 human cadets were maintaining contact despite being assigned to different squads scattered across the planet. They were sharing tactical information, resource locations, and problem-solving approaches in real time. More significantly, their alien teammates were beginning to adopt human-style approaches to challenges. Species that had operated according to rigid protocols for millennia were suddenly demonstrating creativity, risk-taking, and adaptive thinking. Computer, analyze communication patterns between human cadets and their teammates. The results were unprecedented. Within 8 hours of deployment, human-style problem-solving approaches were spreading across squad boundaries like a beneficial contagion. Alien cadets who had never demonstrated adaptive thinking were suddenly proposing innovative solutions to complex problems. As the first day drew to a close, Vexthal realized that his simple survival exercise had become something far more significant. He wasn't just testing cadet capabilities. He was documenting the emergence of an entirely new approach to military operations. The humans weren't just adapting to their environment. They were teaching adaptation itself. Squad 7 made camp that night in a natural shelter that Sarah had identified during their afternoon reconnaissance. The location provided protection from the binary star's radiation, access to underground water, and strategic positioning for the next day's cache retrieval. As they settled in for the night, HFY Sarah voiced a question that had been troubling her throughout the day. Human Sarah, your decision-making process appears to violate several fundamental principles of risk assessment. How do you maintain confidence when operating with incomplete information? Sarah looked up from where she was working on improvements to their water filtration system. We don't really think about incomplete information the same way you do. For humans, incomplete information is just normal. We're always working with partial data. But how do you make optimal decisions without complete analysis? Veltar asked, his multispectral vision tracking the movements of nocturnal creatures in the distance. We don't make optimal decisions, Sarah replied with a grin. We make good enough decisions, and then we adjust as we learn more. The trick isn't getting everything right the first time. It's being able to change course quickly when you discover you were wrong. Grok's massive frame settled more comfortably against the rock wall. This suggests a fundamentally different relationship with failure than most species maintain. Probably, Sarah agreed. Most species seem to treat failure as something to avoid at all costs. Humans treat failure as information. If something doesn't work, that tells us something useful about the situation. As the temperature dropped and Xeris 7's 2 moons rose over the desert, the conversation continued in a way that would have surprised Instructor Vexthal. Instead of planning tomorrow's activities or reviewing technical procedures, they were discussing philosophy, adaptation theory, and the fundamental differences in how various species approach problem solving. It was during this conversation that HFY Sci-Fi made an observation that would prove prophetic. Human adaptability appears to be less about individual capability and more about systemic approach to uncertainty. What do you mean? Veltar asked. Most species develop capabilities to handle specific types of challenges, HFY Sci-Fi explained, her crystalline form flickering with thought patterns. Humans appear to have developed a capability to develop capabilities. They adapt their adaptation processes based on the challenges they encounter. Sarah considered this. That's actually a really good way to put it. We don't just learn how to do things. We learn how to do things. As they settled in for the night, none of them could have predicted that their casual conversation was being recorded and analyzed by an increasingly bewildered Zephyrian instructor who was beginning to realize that his simple training exercise had uncovered something that would change galactic military doctrine forever. The storm was still approaching, and the real challenges were yet to come. The storm arrived 6 hours ahead of schedule, which should have been a disaster for every squad on Xeris 7. Instead, it became the moment when Instructor Vexthal finally understood what made humans truly terrifying. Weather prediction systems throughout the galaxy were based on mathematical models that assumed linear progression of atmospheric conditions. The storm approaching Xeris 7 had been calculated to arrive at a specific time, with specific intensity, following specific patterns. Military doctrine across 1,000 worlds relied on such predictability. But storms, like most natural phenomena, didn't read mathematical models. Sarah Chun woke her squad 2 hours before dawn as the first electromagnetic disturbances began interfering with their communication systems. The approaching weather front was massive, a churning wall of sand, lightning, and temperature variations that stretched across the horizon like an advancing army. Change of plans, she announced as her teammates stirred from their rest period. The storm's coming early, and it's bigger than predicted. HFY Sci-Fi's crystalline form flickered with concern as she interfaced with their environmental sensors. Atmospheric pressure dropping rapidly. Wind velocity increasing beyond safe operational parameters. Electromagnetic interference will severely limit navigation and communication capabilities. Most military units would have immediately shifted to storm protocols. Seek shelter, wait for passage, minimize exposure to danger. It was logical, practical, and aligned with every survival manual in galactic military history. Sarah Chin grinned. Grok, how much weight can you move in sustained wind conditions? The Corvin considered the question carefully. Depends on wind speed, but I can handle significant loads even in severe weather. Veltar, your multispectral vision. Can you navigate using electromagnetic interference patterns instead of avoiding them? The young Zephyrian's eyes widened with understanding. Theoretically, yes. The interference creates distinctive patterns based on terrain features and metallic deposits. HFY Sci-Fi, instead of fighting the electromagnetic interference, can you use it to enhance your range-finding capabilities? The axiom's form shimmered with calculation. The interference patterns would indeed provide detailed environmental mapping data. But this approach contradicts all standard protocols. Standard protocols are designed for survival, Sarah replied, shouldering her pack. We're not here to survive. We're here to win. Across the desert, Marcus Rodriguez was having a remarkably similar conversation with his squad. The approaching storm had created a crisis for Lumina, whose energy-based physiology was highly sensitive to electromagnetic disturbances. The storm's electromagnetic field will destabilize my matrix within minutes of contact, Lumina explained, her photonic form already showing signs of interference. Nexus buzzed with collective anxiety. Recommend immediate shelter-seeking behavior. Storm passage estimated at 14 hours minimum. 14 hours puts us outside mission parameters, Marcus observed. We need a different approach. Basalt's silicon-based voice resonated with skepticism. Alternative approaches to atmospheric phenomena are limited by physical laws. Marcus studied the approaching storm with the eye of someone who had grown up in the Texas Panhandle, where severe weather was a fact of life rather than an extraordinary crisis. Physical laws, yes. But storms aren't just destruction. They're also energy transfer systems. His plan was audacious even by human standards. Instead of protecting Lumina from the storm's electromagnetic effects, they would harness those effects to enhance her capabilities. Think of it like surfing, Marcus explained as he began constructing what appeared to be a primitive electromagnetic antenna array using materials scavenged from the desert. Instead of fighting the wave, you ride it. The device he created violated several safety protocols and looked like it had been assembled by someone with no understanding of advanced electromagnetic theory, which was precisely why it worked. Lumina, I need you to trust me on this, Marcus said as he completed the final connections. Instead of maintaining your standard energy patterns, I want you to synchronize with the storm's electromagnetic signature. That approach could result in complete matrix dissolution, Lumina replied. But there was curiosity in her energy patterns. Or it could result in temporary supercharged capabilities, Marcus countered. Sometimes you have to risk everything to gain anything. Elena Volkov's squad faced a different crisis entirely. The changing atmospheric pressure had destabilized the geological formations they were navigating, turning their carefully planned route through the canyon system into a death trap. Seismic activity increasing, Prism reported, her crystalline structure detecting minute tremors that indicated imminent rockfall. Current path no longer viable. Fogg's environmental suit registered the atmospheric changes with mechanical precision. Storm arrival will create wind tunnel effects in canyon system. Debris velocity will exceed lethal thresholds. Morph's shape-shifting abilities allowed him to scout ahead, but every potential path showed the same result. Impassable terrain made worse by approaching weather. So we can't go around, can't go through, and can't wait it out, Elena summarized. That leaves going over or going under. Elaborate, her teammates requested in unison. Elena pointed toward the canyon walls rising on either side of their position. Rock climbing in a storm is suicide. But these geological formations are weathered, which means there should be extensive cave systems. Using techniques learned during cave diving expeditions in underwater caverns beneath the Arctic ice, Elena began reading the canyon walls for signs of hidden passages. The markers were subtle, variations in rock coloration, unusual erosion patterns, acoustic anomalies, but they told a story of underground networks carved by millennia of water flow. The storm's going to flood these canyons, she explained as she located what appeared to be a narrow cave entrance. But it's also going to create pressure differentials that will show us where the cave systems connect. Her plan required them to enter an unmapped cave system during a severe storm, navigate by feel and intuition, and emerge at a predetermined location before the mission timeline expired. It was exactly the kind of plan that safety protocols existed to prevent. It was also exactly the kind of plan that would work. David Kim's squad had achieved something that Instructor Vexthal was beginning to realize was typically human. They had turned a crisis into an opportunity. The storm's early arrival should have disrupted their carefully orchestrated plan to centralize mission operations around underground water sources. Instead, David had recognized that the storm itself provided crucial information about planetary geology. Whisper, I need you to listen to the storm, David instructed as electromagnetic displays began dancing across the sky. The sonic specialist's response was confused. Listen to what specifically? The storm creates random noise across multiple frequencies. Not random, David corrected. The storm's interaction with underground structures creates acoustic signatures. We can use those signatures to map the entire underground network in real time. As the storm approached, David's squad positioned themselves at strategic locations around their base camp. Using Whisper's sonic analysis, Felnox's reconnaissance capabilities, and Quartz's molecular detection, they began creating a three-dimensional map of every underground structure within their operational area. The storm is basically giving us free, ground-penetrating radar, David explained as data flowed in from their coordinated sensors. Instead of spending days searching for caches, we're going to map their exact locations in the next few hours. But it was what happened when the storm actually hit that provided Instructor Vexthal with the data that would change everything. At 0347 local time, the storm front reached the first deployed squads. Wind velocity exceeded 200 kilometers per hour. Lightning strikes registered energy outputs that could power small cities. Temperature variations ranged across 60 degrees Celsius in minutes. Electromagnetic interference rendered most advanced technology useless. Every squad without human members immediately implemented emergency protocols. Seek shelter, maintain minimal activity, wait for passage. Every squad with human members did something unprecedented. They used the storm as a force multiplier. Sarah Chen's squad didn't just survive the storm. They used it to complete 2 cache retrievals in 4 hours. The electromagnetic interference that disabled most navigation systems became their navigation system, with HFY Sarah learning to read terrain features through disruption patterns. The winds that made normal movement impossible became power sources for improvised mechanical systems that Grok constructed from canyon debris. Marcus Rodriguez's gamble with Lumina paid off spectacularly. Instead of being disrupted by the storm's electromagnetic field, she synchronized with it, gaining temporary abilities that allowed their squad to move through the storm at speeds that should have been impossible. Elena Volkov's underground route not only protected her squad from the worst weather but allowed them to discover underground passages that connected multiple cache locations. They emerged from their cave system having completed their mission 6 hours ahead of schedule. David Kim's acoustic mapping project provided his squad with complete geological intelligence for their entire operational area. By the time the storm passed, they had located all 3 caches and established supply routes that would support extended operations. But the most significant development was something that Vexthal almost missed in the chaos of real-time monitoring. The human-led squads had begun coordinating their activities across the entire planet. Communication logs showed that despite being separated by hundreds of kilometers and operating under severe electromagnetic interference, all 4 human cadets had maintained contact throughout the storm. They had shared tactical information, coordinated resource distribution, and synchronized their mission timelines. More importantly, they had begun teaching their alien teammates to think like humans. Computer, analyze learning curve progression for non-human cadets and human-led squads. The data that appeared challenged fundamental assumptions about species psychology and adaptation capability. Alien cadets who had operated according to rigid behavioral patterns for their entire lives were suddenly demonstrating creativity, risk assessment, and innovative problem-solving that exceeded their species' established parameters. THYSS Era was not just following Sarah's instructions. She was anticipating needs and proposing solutions that incorporated human-style adaptive thinking with Axiom technological capabilities. Nexus was beginning to demonstrate individual initiative rather than collective decision-making, implementing strategies that the hive mind had never considered possible. Basalt was showing creative use of crystalline abilities that violated silicon-based beings' traditional approaches to environmental interaction. The pattern was consistent across all human-led squads. Alien species were not just learning human techniques. They were developing enhanced versions of their own natural capabilities by applying human-style adaptation principles. This is impossible, Vexthal muttered as he reviewed the data streams. Species psychology doesn't change this rapidly. But the evidence was undeniable. In less than 48 hours, human cadets had not only exceeded all performance projections, They had fundamentally altered the operational capabilities of their alien teammates. As the storm passed, and Zerus-7's twin suns rose over a transformed landscape, Vexthal realized that his training exercise had documented something unprecedented in galactic history. Humans didn't just adapt to challenging situations, they spread adaptability itself. The implications were staggering. If human-style thinking could be taught to other species, if adaptation could be learned and shared, then every assumption about species limitations and capabilities was wrong. Squad 7 emerged from their storm shelter to find a desert that had been completely transformed. Flash floods had carved new canyons. Wind erosion had exposed previously buried structures, and the electromagnetic disturbances had left visible traces in the crystalline sand that revealed underground mineral deposits. "Well," Sarah said as she surveyed the changed landscape, "that was interesting." Sarah's crystalline form was practically glowing with excitement. "Human Sarah, the storm has provided environmental data that would normally require months of geological survey to obtain. We can now optimize our approach to the remaining mission objectives with unprecedented precision." Grok was studying new rock formations that the storm had created. The debris patterns indicate several previously unknown cave systems. "We could establish cache points that would support extended operations across the entire region." Veltar's multispectral vision was revealing details that would have been invisible before the electromagnetic disturbances. The storm's energy discharge has created trace element concentrations that clearly mark underground water networks and mineral deposits. As they prepared to move toward their final objectives, Sarah realized that something fundamental had changed. Her alien teammates weren't just following her lead anymore. They were thinking like humans while retaining their unique species advantages. It was a combination that was proving to be terrifyingly effective. Across the planet, similar transformations were taking place. Human cadets were not just completing impossible missions, they were creating new paradigms for what impossible meant. And Instructor Vexthal was beginning to understand that humanity's true strength wasn't their ability to adapt. It was their ability to teach adaptation to others. On the third day of what was supposed to be a routine survival exercise, Instructor Vexthal received a communication that would transform his academic experiment into a matter of galactic security. "Instructor Vexthal," the transmission began, bearing the priority encryption codes of Fleet Admiral Korvash herself. "Your training exercise has attracted attention from the Strategic Defense Council. We are implementing immediate protocol modifications to your examination." Vexthal's four eyes focused on the communication screen with growing concern. Fleet Admiral Korvash commanded the Council's most elite rapid response units. Her personal involvement in a training exercise was unprecedented. "New mission parameters are being transmitted now," the Admiral continued. "Your cadets have 18 standard hours to locate and neutralize a simulated enemy installation that has been deployed to Zerus-7. This installation utilizes adaptive defensive systems that respond to conventional tactical approaches. Consider this a real-world application of their training." The transmission ended, leaving Vexthal staring at mission specifications that made his original survival exercise look like a children's game. The simulated enemy installation was actually a prototype automated defense system designed to test the galaxy's most elite military units. It had successfully defeated every squad that had attempted to breach its defenses over the past 2 years. The system was specifically designed to counter known tactical approaches of every major galactic species. It learned from each assault, adapted its defensive patterns, and became progressively more difficult to defeat. Standard military doctrine required specialized assault squads with months of preparation and cutting-edge equipment to have any chance of success. Vexthal's cadets had basic training uniforms and whatever they had improvised from desert materials. "Computer, transmit new mission parameters to all squads," Vexthal commanded, though he was already calculating the probability of mission success. The numbers were not encouraging. On the planet's surface, Sarah Chun received the updated mission briefing while her squad was completing their final cache retrieval. The location data showed a fortified installation approximately 30 kilometers from their current position, defended by automated systems that had thus far proved impregnable. "Well, this is new." she said as she reviewed the mission specifications. THYSS era, can you interface with their defensive systems and provide tactical analysis? The Axiom's crystalline form flickered with concentration as she attempted to connect with the installation's network. After several minutes, she withdrew with what humans would interpret as electronic frustration. The defensive system is unlike anything in my database, she reported. It appears to utilize some form of adaptive artificial intelligence that modifies its responses based on incoming threats. Each approach vector is analyzed and countered with unprecedented efficiency. Grok studied the installation's structural data with his geological expertise. Fortification shows standard construction patterns, but positioned to utilize natural terrain advantages. Approach routes are limited and easily defended. Veltar's reconnaissance flight had provided visual confirmation of what the data suggested. The installation was positioned in the center of a natural basin, surrounded by elevated positions that provided perfect fields of fire for automated defense systems. Any conventional assault would be detected long before reaching effective range. Okay, Sarah said, settling into what her teammates had learned to recognize as her problem-solving posture. What do we know about how other squads have attempted this? She activated her communication implant to contact the other human cadets. Marcus, Elena, David, anyone else seeing this new mission? Got it. Marcus replied from across the desert. Looks like we're supposed to assault a fortress that's designed specifically to kill us. Standard Tuesday for humans. Then, Elena's voice carried the dry humor that had become characteristic of their group communications. I'm reviewing the defensive system's operational history, David reported. It's defeated assault attempts by Corvin heavy infantry, Zephyrian airstrikes, Axiom electronic warfare specialists, and combined arms approaches from multiple species. Which means, Sarah concluded, it's programmed to counter every known tactical approach. But not unknown ones, Marcus added with growing excitement. This thing is designed to fight galactic military doctrine. It's not designed to fight humans. The conversation that followed would have been incomprehensible to most galactic military strategists. Instead of analyzing the defensive system's capabilities and developing countermeasures, the humans began discussing what the system wouldn't expect. The key is that adaptive systems learn from experience, Elena explained to her increasingly confused alien teammates. But they can only adapt to things they've seen before. Elaborate on this concept, Fogg requested through his environmental suits translation system. Most species approach tactical problems systematically, Elena continued. They analyze threats, develop optimal responses, and implement proven strategies. The adaptive defense system is designed to counter systematic approaches. But humans don't use systematic approaches, David added from his position. We use whatever works. As the four squads began converging on the installation's location, Instructor Vexthal watched their movement patterns with growing bewilderment. Instead of establishing observation posts, analyzing defensive patterns, and developing coordinated assault plans, the human-led squads appeared to be implementing something that violated every principle of military science. They were approaching the problem like it was a puzzle to be solved rather than an enemy to be defeated. Squad 7 moving to preliminary observation position, Sarah reported as her team reached the rim of the basin containing the enemy installation. The structure below was intimidating. A crystalline fortress that seemed to grow from the desert floor itself, surrounded by automated turret systems, sensor arrays, and energy barriers that shimmered in the heat. Scanner readings showed defensive capabilities that could track and neutralize threats across multiple dimensional spectrums. Visual confirmation of defensive systems, Veltar reported. Energy barriers, kinetic interceptors, and what appears to be some form of adaptive camouflage system. THYSS era, any luck penetrating their network architecture? Sarah asked. Negative. The system's firewall adapts to my interface attempts in real time. Each probe I send is analyzed and blocked within seconds. Grok was studying the geological formations around the installation. Bedrock composition suggests artificial reinforcement. Underground support structures extend well beyond visible perimeter. Most military commanders would have used this intelligence to develop a conventional assault plan. Sarah Chun did something different entirely. Okay, team, we're going to do something that's going to sound insane, she announced. We're going to walk down there and knock on their front door. The silence that followed was heavy with confusion and concern. Human Sarah, HFY Sarah finally managed. Tactical analysis indicates such an approach would result in immediate neutralization by defensive systems. Only if they interpret us as a threat, Sarah replied with a grin. What if we approach as something else entirely? Meanwhile, Marcus Rodriguez was implementing an approach that was characteristically human in its disregard for conventional wisdom. Instead of attempting to penetrate the installation's defenses, he was systematically studying what the defenses were designed to protect. Nexus, I need you to analyze the defensive system's behavioral patterns, he instructed. But I don't want to know what it does. I want to know what it doesn't do. The hive mind buzzed with confusion. Elaborate on negative capability analysis. Every system has limitations based on its design parameters, Marcus explained. This thing is programmed to counter military threats. But what if we're not military threats? Using Lumina's enhanced energy sensing capabilities developed during their storm experience and Basalt's geological analysis, Marcus began mapping the installation's passive sensor network. Instead of looking for ways to avoid detection, he was looking for ways to be detected as something harmless. The system's threat assessment protocols are based on recognized tactical signatures, he realized. Movement patterns, energy outputs, formation structures. It's looking for military behavior. But we're not military, Basalt observed. We are students. Exactly, Marcus grinned. What if we act like students? Elena Volkov's approach was perhaps the most audacious of all. Rather than attempting to breach the installation's defenses, she was planning to make the defenses irrelevant. The system is designed to protect a fixed position, she explained to her increasingly amazed teammates. But what if the position isn't fixed anymore? Using techniques learned from her geological analysis of the canyon systems, Elena had identified structural vulnerabilities in the installation's foundation. The defensive systems were anchored to bedrock formations that could be undermined with sufficient geological knowledge and precise application of force. You propose to move an entire fortification? Prism asked, her crystalline structure flickering with calculation attempts. I propose to make it move itself, Elena replied. The installation's weight distribution is designed for stable ground. If we alter the ground stability in the right places, the structure will shift on its own. David Kim's solution was the most subtle and perhaps the most brilliant. Instead of attacking the installation's defenses, he was planning to recruit them. Felnox, can you maintain camouflage while carrying complex technical equipment? He asked. Yes, though the equipment's energy signature may be detectable. What if the energy signature is exactly what we want them to detect? David replied. Quartz, your molecular analysis capabilities. Can you replicate the energy signatures of known galactic military equipment? Such replication would be possible with appropriate materials and energy sources. Whisper, your sonic capabilities could simulate the acoustic signatures of approaching military units, correct? Theoretically, yes. But such deception would only be effective until the system realized no actual units were present. David's grin was predatory. That's the beauty of adaptive systems. They learn from experience. What if we give them an experience that teaches them the wrong lesson? As the four squads implemented their unconventional approaches, Instructor Vexthal found himself witnessing something unprecedented in galactic military history. Instead of developing tactical solutions to overcome the installation's defenses, the humans were redefining what the problem actually was. Sarah Chin's squad approached the installation's perimeter carrying improvised survey equipment and moving in patterns that resembled geological research teams rather than military units. When the defensive systems scanned them, the threat assessment protocols found no recognizable military signatures. Instead of triggering defensive responses, Squad 7 was classified as non-threatening civilian personnel and ignored by the automated systems. We're inside the perimeter, Sarah reported with casual confidence. Proceeding to primary objective. Marcus Rodriguez's squad approached carrying energy signatures that perfectly mimicked Axiom scientific equipment and Crystec geological sensors. To the adaptive defense system, they appeared to be exactly what they claimed to be. Students conducting research under official authorization. No defensive response detected, Marcus confirmed. Moving to secondary positions. Elena Volkov had begun her geological modifications of the installation's foundation, using carefully placed seismic charges that would appear to the system's sensors as natural settling or minor earthquake activity. David Kim's Phantom military units had drawn the attention of the defensive systems, causing them to adapt their protocols to counter imaginary threats that became progressively more sophisticated and dangerous. The installation's AI is learning to defend against threats that don't exist, David reported. It's dedicating increasing resources to countering phantom attacks. What happened next would become the subject of study in military academies throughout the galaxy for centuries to come. Squad 7 simply walked through the front entrance of the installation while the defensive systems were focused on tracking David's phantom threats. The installation's AI was so busy adapting to imaginary military assaults that it overlooked the 4 individuals who politely asked to be let in for a facility tour. Marcus Rodriguez's squad entered through service tunnels that weren't defended because the AI had classified them as authorized research personnel. Elena Volkov's geological modifications reached critical mass, causing the installation to begin tilting at an angle that made its defensive systems ineffective. As automated systems attempted to compensate for the structural instability, they became vulnerable to techniques that would never have worked under normal circumstances. David Kim's Phantom Army finally revealed its true nature, causing the adaptive AI to realize it had been deceived. But, by that point, the system had modified its defensive protocols so extensively to counter imaginary threats that it was no longer capable of defending against real ones. Within 6 hours of receiving their new mission parameters, all 4 human-led squads had successfully penetrated and neutralized the adaptive defense system. The installation that had defeated elite military units for 2 years had been overcome by 4 groups of students using approaches that violated every principle of accepted tactical doctrine. In the orbital command center, Instructor Vexthal stared at mission completion reports that indicated something far more significant than successful cadet training. Humanity had just demonstrated capabilities that could revolutionize galactic military doctrine. But, more importantly, they had proven that their approach to adaptation wasn't just effective, it was teachable. The alien cadets in human-led squads had not only participated in impossible mission success, they had contributed innovations that exceeded their species' established capabilities. As Fleet Admiral Korvash's priority transmission appeared on his communication screen, Vexthal realized that his simple training exercise had become something that would change the balance of power throughout the known galaxy. And humanity had only been part of galactic civilization for 47 years. The implications were terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. 3 days after the impossible mission success on Xeris 7, Instructor Vexthal stood before the assembled faculty of the Galactic Military Academy, preparing to deliver a briefing that would fundamentally alter how the galaxy understood warfare, adaptation, and the true nature of human capabilities. The Great Assembly Hall had been built to accommodate representatives from over 1,000 species, its vast crystalline dome providing perfect acoustics for beings whose communication ranged from subsonic vibrations to quantum field fluctuations. Today, it hosted the most distinguished gathering of military minds in galactic history. Fleet Admiral Korvash occupied the central position, her scarred Zephyrian form radiating the authority that came from commanding the galaxy's most elite forces. Around her sat the Strategic Council, beings whose tactical expertise had guided galactic civilization through countless conflicts over the past millennia. Instructor Vexthal, the Admiral's voice carried across the hall with mechanical precision. Your preliminary report suggests that 4 human cadets and their mixed species squads achieved mission objectives that our best analysis indicated were impossible. Explain. Vexthal activated the holographic display system, and the hall filled with 3-dimensional representations of Xeris 7's terrain, mission parameters, and tactical data streams. The assembled officers studied the information with the systematic precision their species had refined over generations of military excellence. Honored colleagues, Vexthal began. What I am about to present challenges fundamental assumptions about species capabilities, adaptation theory, and military doctrine that have guided our understanding for over 10,000 years. The first hologram showed standard tactical approaches to the survival exercise. Neat, orderly progression patterns that demonstrated logical resource management, systematic exploration, and risk-averse decision-making. Success rates were predictable, methodical, and aligned with established species capabilities. These represent the approaches taken by squads without human participation, Vexthal explained. Notice the adherence to established protocols, the emphasis on proven techniques, and the conservative resource allocation. He gestured, and the display shifted to show the human-led squad's movement patterns. The contrast was immediately apparent: irregular routes, seemingly wasteful energy expenditure, and approaches that appeared to violate basic survival principles. And these represent the human-influenced approaches, Vexthal continued. At first analysis, these patterns appear inefficient and dangerous. Admiral Corvash leaned forward in her command position. Instructor, your preliminary report indicated superior performance from human-led squads. This data appears to contradict that conclusion. Only if one assumes that efficiency and success are measured by conventional metrics, Vexthal replied. Computer, display mission completion statistics. The holographic data that materialized drew gasps from species across the spectrum of galactic military command. Human-led squads had not only completed their original objectives, they had exceeded mission parameters by margins that should have been mathematically impossible. General Thexmore, a Corvin whose heavy world physiology represented the pinnacle of military physical capability, studied the data with growing confusion. Instructor, these numbers suggest that human cadets achieved resource efficiency ratings that exceed our theoretical maximum capabilities. Correct, Vexthal confirmed. But the truly significant data becomes apparent when we analyze how they achieve these results. The display shifted to show detailed behavioral analysis of human decision-making patterns. Instead of the linear, logical progression that characterized most galactic species, human thought processes appeared chaotic, contradictory, and fundamentally unpredictable. Humans appear to operate using what can only be described as controlled chaos, Vexthal explained. They make decisions based on incomplete information, take calculated risks that conventional analysis would classify as dangerous, and modify their approach continuously based on changing circumstances. He gestured toward specific data points that highlighted the most significant discoveries. More importantly, they appear capable of teaching these adaptive behaviors to other species. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. If humans could teach adaptation, if their unconventional approaches could be learned and applied by other species, then every assumption about species limitations was wrong. Commander Velkoth, an axiom whose crystalline intelligence had revolutionized galactic computational theory, finally broke the silence. Instructor, you are suggesting that human cognitive patterns can override millions of years of evolutionary programming in other species. Such capability would be unprecedented. Which brings us to the most significant discovery, Vexthal replied, activating a new series of holograms. Computer, display the performance metrics for non-human cadets in human-led squads. The data that appeared challenged everything the assembled officers thought they knew about species psychology. Alien cadets who had operated according to rigid behavioral patterns their entire lives had begun demonstrating creativity, risk assessment, and problem-solving capabilities that exceeded their species' established parameters. THYSS era had not only learned human-style adaptive thinking but had enhanced it with axiom technological capabilities, creating solutions that neither species could have developed independently. Nexus had begun operating as individual consciousness rather than collective hive mind, demonstrating initiative and creativity that the species had never exhibited in recorded history. Basalt had shown flexible use of crystalline abilities that violated silicon-based beings' traditional environmental interaction protocols. The pattern was consistent across all human-influenced squads. Alien species weren't just learning human techniques. They were transcending their own evolutionary limitations. This is impossible, General Thexmore stated with the certainty of absolute physical law. Species capabilities are determined by millions of years of evolutionary adaptation. Cognitive patterns cannot be altered in a matter of days. Yet here is the evidence. Vexthal replied calmly. Computer, display the tactical analysis of the adaptive defense system engagement. What followed was perhaps the most disturbing revelation of all. The holographic replay showed how human-led squads had approached the supposedly impregnable installation not by overcoming its defenses, but by redefining what the problem actually was. Instead of developing better weapons, they had made weapons irrelevant. Instead of improving their technology, they had made technology unnecessary. Instead of defeating the system, they had convinced it to defeat itself. The adaptive defense system was designed to counter every known tactical approach of every major galactic species, Admiral Korvash observed. How did 4 groups of students overcome defenses that have successfully repelled elite military units for 2 years? They didn't overcome the defenses, Vexthal explained. They made the defenses irrelevant by approaching the problem in ways the system was never designed to counter. He highlighted the specific approaches. Squad 7 had simply asked permission to enter. Squad 5 had convinced the system they were authorized researchers. Squad 3 had altered the geological conditions until the defenses couldn't function properly. Squad 9 had taught the system to defend against imaginary threats while real ones walked through unnoticed. None of these approaches appear in any tactical manual, Commander Velkoff noted. They violate established principles of military engagement. Exactly, Vexthal replied, which is why they worked. The humans didn't try to be better at conventional warfare. They redefined what warfare means. The implications were staggering. If human approaches to conflict resolution could be taught and applied throughout galactic military forces, if adaptation itself could become a learnable skill rather than an evolutionary accident, then the balance of power throughout the galaxy would fundamentally shift. But the most significant revelation was yet to come. Computer, display communication logs for all human cadets during the exercise period. The data showed something that had initially appeared as a minor anomaly, but proved to be the key to understanding human capabilities. Throughout the entire exercise, despite being separated by hundreds of kilometers and assigned to different squads, the human cadets had maintained constant communication and coordination. They operated as a distributed intelligence network, Vexthal explained. Each squad faced different challenges, developed different solutions, and shared those solutions instantaneously across their entire group. Telepathic capability? Admiral Korvash inquired. No, something far more sophisticated. They shared not just information, but approaches to thinking about problems. Each human cadet's experiences became learning opportunities for all human cadets. The assembled officers began to understand the true scope of what they were witnessing. Humans didn't just adapt individually. They created adaptation networks that enhanced the capabilities of everyone connected to them. Furthermore, Vexthal continued, their alien teammates began exhibiting similar networking behaviors. Species that had never demonstrated collective learning capabilities began sharing innovations across squad boundaries. General Thexmore's massive frame shifted with what humans would recognize as discomfort. Instructor, you are describing capabilities that approach strategic-level intelligence enhancement. Such capabilities would represent a fundamental shift in the balance of galactic civilization. Which brings us to the question we must answer. Admiral Korvash stated with grim authority. Are human capabilities of benefit to galactic civilization, or do they represent a potential threat that must be contained? The silence that followed was heavy with implications. The discovery of human adaptation capabilities had created a strategic dilemma. Embrace the revolutionary enhancement of galactic military capability, or fear the unpredictable consequences of fundamental change. It was Commander Velkoff who finally voiced the question that everyone was considering. What happens when beings capable of teaching adaptation encounter challenges that require them to adapt beyond their current limitations? Vexthal had been expecting this question. Computer, display projection analysis for human capability development over extended timelines. The holographic models that appeared showed mathematical progressions that defied conventional understanding. If human learning rates continued to accelerate, if their ability to teach adaptation continued to spread, if their networking capabilities continued to enhance collective intelligence, then, within a few generations they would possess capabilities that transcended current definitions of species limitations. They are not just adapting, Vexthal concluded. They are evolving adaptation itself. And they are teaching the evolution to everyone they encounter. The assembled officers contemplated the implications. Humanity represented either the greatest enhancement to galactic civilization in recorded history, or the greatest threat to established order that had ever emerged. Admiral Corvash stood, her scarred frame commanding absolute attention. Instructor Vexthal, you will prepare a comprehensive analysis of human capabilities for presentation to the full Galactic Council. The Council will need to determine appropriate policy responses to these discoveries. As the assembly dispersed, conversations erupted in dozens of languages and communication methods. Some species viewed the human discoveries as opportunities for unprecedented advancement. Others saw them as threats to the stability that had governed galactic civilization for millennia. But, in the quiet of his office, reviewing data streams that showed human cadets continuing to exceed every prediction and limitation, Vexthal reached a conclusion that would prove prophetic. Humanity hadn't joined galactic civilization to be changed by it. They had joined to change it. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for the transformation that was coming. On distant Earth, in the offices of the Terran diplomatic mission, Ambassador Sarah Martinez received a priority communication from the Galactic Military Academy requesting immediate expansion of human cadet enrollment in advanced military training programs. The message was politely worded and professionally delivered. But, between the lines, she could read a truth that both excited and worried her. The galaxy had just discovered what humanity was truly capable of. And they wanted more. As she drafted her response, Ambassador Martinez smiled with the quiet confidence that had become humanity's signature trait in galactic affairs. The galaxy was about to learn that what they had seen so far was just the beginning. After all, humans had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to adapt. Now they had an entire galaxy to teach. The real adventure was just beginning. In the depths of space, aboard ships carrying human emigrants to distant worlds, in research stations where human scientists worked alongside alien colleagues, in diplomatic missions where human negotiators facilitated previously impossible agreements, the pattern was beginning to emerge. Wherever humans went, they left behind something more valuable than technology or resources. They left behind the knowledge that adaptation was possible, that limitations were temporary, and that any challenge could be overcome with sufficient creativity and determination. The galaxy was about to discover that when humans said they were good at adaptation, they were being modest. What they were truly excellent at was teaching everyone else to be excellent too. And, in a universe full of challenges, that was the most valuable skill of all.